Welcome to 10 News at 3. I was trying to get the teleprompter over here. That's why I'm moving around, folks. I'm Robin Wilhoit. We begin with 3 of today's top stories. We're going to get straight to them right now. Emergencies are up in the country's most visited national park. State officials say they've responded to 38 calls in the Smokies so far this year, 16 more than this time last year. Rangers say the hot spots include Alum Cave Trail, Rainbow Falls Trail, Abrams Falls, and parts of the Appalachian Trail. You can watch our full story on the most dangerous places in the Smokies streaming right here on WBIR Plus. To our second story now, new at this hour, an update on a story we first reported at noon today. Sevier County Sheriff Michael Hodges Jr. posting online that 2 children previously missing have been found and they are safe. The sheriff says authorities arrested 1 person for custodial interference. The 7-year-old girl, the 9-year-old boy, they were last seen on Newport Highway. We don't know where authorities found them, but the sheriff's office did thank law enforcement out of Louisiana. Deputies also thanked everyone who shared information, saying in part, your support truly made a difference. And 3 eagles still missing from the Eagle Sanctuary in Dollywood. They escaped a little more than a week ago after a storm damaged the Eagle Mountain Sanctuary. Team members with the foundation that care for the birds, well, they are working to track them down. If you think you have seen one of the eagles, call the Eagle Foundation or go to the website eagles.org. All right. We are now turning to a story we have been covering for months now, a series of shakeups in leadership at the Juvenile Detention Center in Knox County. You can read on WBIR.com how the now former superintendent, Richard Bean, is suing the county, the mayor, and others, claiming he was unlawfully forced to resign. But let's move this story forward. Today, we are reporting on the push by local leaders to have the state fund much needed repairs at that facility. Reporter Ellis Rold working on this story for us today. And Ellis, number one, thanks for taking time out of trying to put this story together to come and fill us in on what you're finding. But let's talk about, number one, the needs at this facility. They are significant.
Yes, they are. And we've been reporting on the Bean Center for months and the issues that it's had, obviously, with Richard Bean stepping down last year. But really, they put basically a temporary advisory board in place last year to kind of help the center navigate some of these changes. And what ended up happening is they kind of created a list of all of the things that the center needed to do to improve. You know, there were issues with security, there were issues with record keeping. Record keeping was a really big problem. A lot of things were on paper. So there were all sorts of things that the center needed to address. But the main gap that we have been talking about for months with county leaders was what they called capital improvements. So these are improvements to this massive juvenile detention facility in Knox County, and they needed to fix security cameras. They needed to fix locks on doors. So all sorts of things that they're trying to address that the county just didn't quite have the funds to address that gap over the last few months. So we do know that Mayor Glenn Jacobs went to Governor Bill Lee and he asked, you know, they talked about the issues that the center has been having and asked for $10 million to be included in this year's budget. Obviously that had to be approved by the General Assembly, but they got that money. And so that money is going to be available to Knox County starting on July 1st. And what's essentially going to happen is they're going to be able to make those improvements to security, to the locks, to the building itself, right? But then they're also going to essentially split up the building and have some room for DCS as well.
Okay, let's talk about, this is just the latest, if you will, in what has played out over months, starting with a whistleblower situation.
Yes.
This is obviously on the back end of what started. So how do you see this helping the facility going forward?
Well, I think this is kind of, I mentioned, you know, it's a big ticket item that the facility has needed. They had a big long list of all of the things internally. The whistleblower investigation had to do with a lot of record keepings and, you know, how they handled medications at the facility. I think this is kind of that I don't want to say last thing because they're still continuing to make improvements.
Right.
But they needed the money to make these changes.
And they got that money. And
Yes.
$10 million is a lot of money for sure. This story coming up later today on 10 News at 4 and 6.
Yes.
All right. Ellis, we appreciate you. Thanks so
for having
much.
me.
Look for that story. When we come back, Tennessee lawmakers, they are putting pressure on state prison leaders. This after an officer stabbed to death at the Morgan County Correctional Facility. We're going to sit down with our team investigating the concerns behind bars. That's next. Well, a prison in East Tennessee is under scrutiny. 2 months ago, an officer at the Morgan County Correctional Complex was stabbed to death while on the job. This comes after more than a decade of reported problems with the locks on cell doors in Tennessee prisons. Coming up, you will hear from members of our news team who are investigating this story. But first, here are the latest details as state lawmakers flag concerns behind bars at Department of Correction facilities.
What was supposed to be a routine cell lock check turned deadly.
I think that it could have been prevented.
In the weeks following the stabbing death of Officer Dustin Pettigo, questions inside the state's prison system have shifted towards warning signs that were missed.
This inmate had made threats, had sent letters that he was going to kill somebody, and that they did not take preliminary cautions to do something about him.
And changes that need to be made.
We need to have an overall look at our prisons for the maintenance and stuff and get a significant report of the things that need to be fixed.
State Senator Tom Hatcher is reviewing concerns directly with his committee and says staffing shortages are a major problem.
We have over 400 position that's not filled in our prisons. So I think we've got to have more oversight. We don't know the magic answer yet. We're working on that.
One legislative step that he's taken is body cameras.
I decided to file a bill this past year to do a pilot program in Tridesdale to get information and data and that back to us to see if this is something that we feel like is going to be something that we need to do statewide in all of our prisons.
The senator says the goal is to turn this tragedy into action, addressing systematic issues before another one occurs. State Senator Ken Yeager and State Representative Monty Fritz also tell WBIR they want to see fixes.
I think this case has opened the eyes of a lot of different people that really didn't know that we had a serious situation.
And that was Alana Mutnick reporting. She and our chief investigative producer, John North, have been working together on this story. I sat down with them earlier today in our podcast studio to discuss it further. Here's that conversation. Alana, John, thank you so much for coming here to let's dig deeper into this story.
Sure.
Something that struck me in the story we just watched is what Senator Hatcher said. This opened the eyes to the serious situation that's playing out. And apparently this has been playing out for a while. That's disturbing.
Kind of startling, too. I think it all started and it came out April 1. The Senate Finance Committee had it was supposed to be a budget kind of chat with the TDOC commissioner. But by that point, some lawmakers had quietly become concerned about Dustin Pettigo's killing. And so they wanted to ask Frank Strada about that, and they also were hearing about this problem with the locks, because what authorities are saying is that Steed, perhaps with a little piece of paper, was able to jimmy open his electric lock and sprung out and attacked Pettigo. So at that hearing, April 1, suddenly we started hearing, and I was listening to it live because I'd been told you should listen to this by somebody. We start hearing that, oh, yeah, this was actually a problem that we've known about since 2013. And I'm listening to that going, what? What? I can
More
only
than
imagine.
10 years.
Yeah, and I can only imagine what all the correctional officers in the state of Tennessee who work in prisons that have been affected by this, what they've been thinking. But, you know, Robin, TDOC is a very closed-mouth, closed culture. You don't hear a whole lot about stuff. It's a prison. You're not really supposed to. And it's not the most open of state agencies. But, yeah, I think everybody sort of learned at that point, other than in the prison culture, that this was a problem in the state.
Long-standing problem, and that it appears they were trying to address this problem. There was a list of facilities they were addressing the lock issues. But a lot of Morgan County was way down on that list.
Morgan County, yeah. So there was a list of prison facilities that had these lock issues, and as John said, these issues have been known, when you really think about it, since 2013. That's more than a decade that this has been known. And Morgan County was last on that list. But going back to, as John was saying, the conversation that we had with Senator Hatcher yesterday, he said that just these red flags and knowing about these issues for so long, the death of Officer Pettigo, it was preventable. You know, he said, I remember, quote, "It likely didn't have to happen." And that just stood out in my mind, knowing that it is so unfortunate that something like this had to happen. Hopefully, I guess more immediate action is going to be taken, and they're taking a deeper look into these issues in progress. He said they're having a lot of conversations are having right now between the state and then corrections officials, but it's just for 13 years, especially when we spoke with Officer Pettigo's father, he said it had been known by countless of the correctional officers that the inmates knew how to jimmy the locks and open them.
They knew how to do that. And there were some concerns about the person who is charged in his death, Reginald Steed. We had the opportunity to talk to Dustin Pettigo's father. This is what he had to say about the day that he was moved from one location to the other, talking specifically about Reginald Steed. Let's take a listen.
Which number cut is this, Robin?
That is number 3.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The day that he was moved from one location to another, he killed Dustin that day, and he had made threats. He said, "If you move me to a lower security, I'm going to kill somebody." And that threat was never taken seriously. Why was all that ignored? Why didn't you do something?
Yeah, so the father's saying that Steed had said, I'm going to kill somebody, and that day he is charged in the murder of Dustin Pettigo. You know, another situation that a red flag, if you will, or concern, 400 positions open in the Department of Corrections.
Lots of red flags. That's a big one. That's something that Senator Hatcher mentioned to us when we talked to him yesterday in the interview. It's like, we have to do better. We have to fill those positions, and that will help ensure more security for everybody, which will then give the staff sort of a greater sense of comfort about going about and doing their jobs. Dustin Pettigo was by himself conducting door lock checks. And imagine that's part of your job. Go check door locks to make sure they're secure. You wouldn't think in a prison in 21st century that's something that you have to do. But yeah, that's one thing that he said was a problem. He said maintenance is another. He wasn't immediately looking for new legislation. He's not like, I've got a new bill I'm going to pop out right now. Of course, legislature's done for until this January officially, although they'll continue to meet in meetings. But he's like, there are some things we can do right now that are easy enough to do without having to pass new laws.
Yeah, maintenance type
Maintenance is
situations.
one. Let's look at the policies. Let's see what other states are doing. And
Best
let's
practices.
fix these locks.
Yeah, first and foremost, in your reporting, have you all heard whether a lack of money contributes to any of these situations?
Hatcher said that they had the money to fix it. You know, it was just a matter of coming together, having these conversations, and figuring out what needs fixing right now. And as John just said, there could be some legislation passed in the future. Who knows? He's saying that there are fixes right now that they can make, and staffing was the number one issue that he said is most pressing on his mind. And then policy and procedure, and then TDOC oversight. So as you mentioned, we were talking about red flags. A huge red flag, especially that was continuously brought up when we were speaking with Officer Pettigo's family, was the threats that the inmate Reginald Steed had made. And those just, there was no precautionary action that was taken, and that is something that Senator Hatcher really emphasized yesterday, is that this was preventable if that caution was taken when it came to these threats that were being made.
For people who may not be as familiar with this story and the history of this story, let's talk about the people involved in the story. Let's start with Dustin Pettigo first, and then we will get into Reginald Steed. But based on what I've read from your reporting and watching your reporting, his wife said he just wanted to help people.
Yeah, he was a good-hearted man. He cared about people. He cared about pets, cared about animals. He was a good soul, middle kid in the family. You know how that is with the birth order.
I'm one of them,
That's right.
the neglected middle.
There you go. But he grew up in I think it's the Wildwood community near Porter Elementary. Just a very kind person who wanted to, like you said, help people. That's something that all of his family said. He saw working at TDOC as an opportunity to do good for people. He was thinking, according to Jade, his widow, nonviolent people, we can do things to help them once they get out. We can get them set on a new path in life. So that's something that he saw as kind of a calling, if you will. I think he'd been a correctional officer about 10 months.
Yeah,
So not long.
He
Not
was
long.
on the job less than a year, and I remember his widow Jade had told us that he was in school at East Tennessee State University, and he wanted to help inmates, once they got out of prison, find employment. And I obviously had never met him, but it was so prevalent, the type of person that he was. He cared about people, and he just had such a good soul, and something that was set on repeat was his love for people and his love for animals. It's
commendable,
yeah.
To want to help people better their lives. Let's talk about Reginald Steed. What is his story?
So Reginald Steed was an inmate in Morgan County Correctional Complex, and at the time, he wasn't in the facility that Officer Pettigo was working at the time, but the threats that he was making was, once I am moved to a lower restricted facility, I am going to kill an officer. And the day, as we just heard from Officer Pettigo's father, the day that he was moved into a new unit, that was the day that he stabbed Officer Pettigo. And the family of Officer Pettigo was told that Reginald Steed had no misdemeanors, but he had 17 violations at the time, and he was known for making these threats.
So they were told he had no violations, but indeed
he did.
They found out after the fact.
Yeah. So it's not clear how Steed was able to open the cell door. We do not know that, but we do know that inmates, Commissioner Estrada had confirmed that there was a way that inmates had figured out how to open these cell locks.
Yeah, and he had a shank.
Yeah, that's another question that Ken Pettigo had. It's like, well, if he was moved, how was he able to do that? Where did that come from? Wouldn't you, if you're moving somebody, wouldn't you be searching them? Did he get it after he moved to his new location? And from the people I've talked to, it does sound like they're pretty confident that Steed knew how to jimmy open that lock, probably with paper. So I think it was kind of common knowledge with inmates that, hey, this is what you can do. Usually there wasn't violence associated with what they did, but as we've been discussing, Steed, authorities say, had made up his mind, I'm going to hurt somebody, and I'm going to make a statement by doing that.
Why was he there in the first place, and where does his situation stand right now?
He had several convictions, some of which I think he strongly objected to. One was personal violence against somebody. I think there might have been a robbery or a theft charge as well. He's from Jackson, Tennessee originally. He's about 35 years old. And according to his dad, Dustin's dad and other people that we've talked to, he was part of a gang. And one of the angles that we're exploring is that there was a gang program to sort of deprogram you or take away the incentives that an inmate might have to be part of a gang. And he didn't like that. But it's kind of a pressure on him. There is pressure from higher-ups to do this kind of a program, and then you'll sort of graduate and you'll get better, and then you have chances to move on with your lives. And he didn't like the programs, is what we're hearing. We're still reporting on that.
Well, from that, let's talk about the reporting going forth. This story is far from over. There are many angles of this story. Where next does your reporting take you?
Well, we are still in contact with, obviously, Officer Pettigo's family. We are looking to speak with correctional officers at the facility because, once again, after our conversation with Senator Hatcher, this is a much larger issue within Tennessee's prison systems. It is not just the Morgan County Correctional Complex. It is heartbreaking and tragic that this had to happen, but as Senator Hatcher said, it's opening the eyes of so many people when it comes to what needs to change and what needs to change now.
Right, and now and in the next legislative session, would you assume, John, that there would be some legislation put forth next session to dig deeper into these concerns and address them?
I'd say there's a fair chance of that. And for listeners who don't know this, we've talked to 3 Tennessee lawmakers that have concerns about this. That's kind of unusual. Ken Yeager, who brought this all up at that April 1 Senate Finance Committee meeting, he's the one that sort of kicked open the door. And we've also had him on Inside Tennessee, and he's talked about it then. And then you've talked to Monty Fritz, who is a state representative from Roane County. Ken Yeager, this is in Ken Yeager's district where this killing occurred, Monty Fritz and then Tom Hatcher. I honestly anticipate that we'll be talking to more. Senator Hatcher mentioned to us there's sort of a small group of state senators that are keen to learn more about this. Ed Jackson is one of them. I would not be surprised if we end up talking to Senator Jackson. By the way, it's worth mentioning last week, Monty Fritz wrote a letter to Governor Lee in March, and I don't think he got a response, or at least I think he told you he hadn't gotten a response?
Yeah, so he hadn't gotten a response at the time. Just to briefly go over our conversation, Monty Fritz had mentioned he had been speaking to and has spoken to countless correctional officers there, and one of their main concerns was their concerns weren't being heard. They were scared to, I guess, speak out when it came to retaliation because they just there's a lot of information when it comes to this case, and he was just saying that higher ups like state lawmakers and officials need to be the voice for these correctional officers.
And then, of course, in your story, your reporting yesterday, it was revealed that the governor paid a visit last week to Morgan County.
Yeah, we heard last Tuesday morning that he was going to be coming to Morgan County, and I was like, oh, that's very interesting. And so I immediately sent a message over. I was like, hi, hearing that the governor may go over to Morgan County. Is anything to that? Heard nothing. Sent another message the following day after again hearing that he did come over. And by the way, some TDOC people, including maybe Commissioner Strada, were there with him, spent maybe an hour or 30 minutes there, went into one building. Somebody who had great specific knowledge said he went into this building, but he didn't go into this building. He did not supposedly go into the building where Pettigo was slain. Again, we've heard nothing about that. So yesterday we asked Hatcher, we're like, so hey, have you been hearing that the governor went over there? He's like, oh yeah, we heard that as well.
Yeah. And that's the disappointment.
Yeah, they heard about the fact. Him and Yeager heard about it after they had visited the prison in Morgan County, and yeah, quote, he said, "We're a little disappointed. You know, this is Yeager's district, and they were made unaware, and they found out after the fact. And this is something that also there's a separate investigation that Yeager was kind of spearheading with the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, and it just brought some disappointment. You know, they're following this very closely. They feel very passionately about this, and they were not aware of that visit.
Well, this story...
I just want to make one more point. Russell Johnson also, as the district attorney general, has been working this case pretty hard, I gather, from what I've been able to see. He anticipates, he thinks, he'll take his case against Steed to the grand jury, and as the family very quickly told us, they support seeking the death penalty if he's indicted in a murder case. So if he's indicted for murder, then there's a very strong likelihood that if this goes to trial, he'll be facing the threat of the death penalty.
Clearly, this story has many more chapters to be told. You will be covering it. We'll be following your stories. Thank you both for breaking this down for us. We appreciate you.
Robin.
And you are watching 10 News at 3, streaming on WBIR Plus. We'll be right back. No better way to wrap it up than with Todd Howell. Todd, I woke up at 4-something this morning and I heard the most beautiful noise, rain.
Rain, thunderstorms. It has been a long time since we've had spring, thunderstorms and heavy showers, some good rain. Some folks are going to sleep better tonight after getting woke up last night. Got another chance for scatter storms late tonight and part of our Wednesday, cooler as we round out the week with highs in the 60s, Rob.